And the thing that I always find interesting is, and I think that your folks out in the field know this better than anybody, is pre-2008, the AMCs were starting to become a factor in the marketplace, but they weren't the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and they were trying to develop sort of a value-added services model, and then the HVCC came in and they basically said, you know what, the heck with that model, we're just going to haircut our service provider, the appraiser, and we're going to take our cut off the top to 1/3 or more of what we're charging as the appraisal fee. We're just going to lop that off. And I think that's really where the HVCC had sort of a catalyzing effect. And I'm curious to know sort of, and we've seen it somewhat statistically in terms of the number of licensed and certified and trainee appraisers in some states, but sort of what are your folks seeing, Chuck, out in the field in terms of, one, just the sheer number of their own peers that are not out there doing the work anymore, and two, how folks have managed to hang on in the residential space through sort of this tumultuous period that we are slowly climbing back out of, sort of post HVCC.
Well, the numbers are definitely down across the board, and there's some people, if they've been in the business long enough, they've spread their client base and they can kind of weather the storm of taking the pressure from the AMCs, but a lot of them, it's the only game in town, and it's the monopoly you were talking about. It's really been a problem.
Are they finding, because I know that I've heard some sort of feedback that there are some AMCs that have started to comply with Dodd-Frank as intended, and there's others who are going to hold out to the last possible moment until they absolutely have to. What has been the experience post Dodd-Frank and post the appraisal independence regulations coming online for your folks out in the field? Have they seen AMCs starting to bring the fees back up ahead of the curve, or are they kind of waiting until the last possible moment?
I think there's probably very few, but a few that have better fees, but at least, and I don't have any statistical evidence just from going to conferences and chapter meetings, the majority of them, if the fees are going up, it's not trickling down to the appraiser, it's just going to the AMC.
Right. And we should be clear that there are AMCs and there are AMCs, and some of the AMCs might, in recognition of the importance of the fee they pay to the quality they get from the appraiser, may be willing to pay them more, closer to what they normally would have received. On the other hand, there are those AMCs, and frankly, I think they predominate, that are trying to, give the haircut and squeeze the appraisal fee in order to make their fees look better and in fact be better. Interestingly, some of these AMCs are owned by the mortgage lenders. So the mortgage lenders are making a profit, not just from underwriting the loan, but they're making a profit on the AMC side if the AMC is an affiliate. So the more that the appraisal fees are squeezed, the more profit the AMC makes, and in those cases where the AMC is owned by the mortgage lender, it helps the mortgage lender's bottom line as well.
And right, it doesn't, and part of the whole purpose of having this separation sort of becomes a little bit of a sham when you see the lender having an interest in the AMC and they're supposedly, not talking, but who knows?
Exactly.
Well, and under the current structure, and I guess this is a good transition, if you look at your GFE or your settlement statement, and you look at the appraisal fee line right now, you can't differentiate, you being the consumer, between what did my appraiser actually get paid to do the appraisal and how much of what I wrote off in my check. I just think back to when I purchased my own condo. I wrote a check for like $325 when I should have known, well, really, maybe $275 of that or $280, whatever, is going to go to the appraiser, the rest to the AMC. Right now, there's not that disclosure, but one of the things we've worked on, and we've worked on together in a couple of different letters to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, is this idea of fee disclosures or fee separations on both the good faith estimate and the settlement statement. I guess it's kind of an interesting transition to talk about what impact do you think that's going to have on sort of getting the AMCs to move their, in conjunction with what they're required to do by law, move the fees they're paying to the appraisers back up to just even where they were pre-HVCC, and then what impact that's going to have possibly on the actual fee the AMC is recouping if you're seeing, as the consumer, a third of what I just spent went to this administrative backroom office, and I don't really know what I got for the dollar.
Well, I was just going to ask the same thing of Peter, and I know a lot of our members really think that's a really important issue, that if the consumer could see Myself, I don't think it's going to have, if you can get that separation and show it, I don't think it's going to have the effect that a lot of our members are hoping for. Just wondering what you...
Well, I think, we won't know for sure, but we think that, at least in theory, and hopefully to some extent in practice, by showing on the good faith estimate form and on the final settlement form that the $400 appraisal fee is really not all going to the appraiser. In fact, $250 of it is going to the appraiser and the balance to the AMC. We actually think that that might cause the consumer, the home buyer, to say, well, my next door neighbor who just moved in only paid $375 for the appraisal. You're charging me $400 or $425, whatever the case may be. But most of that, or much of that, is not even going to the appraiser. Why not? He or she would be saying to the lender, why don't you order the appraisal directly? Because that way the appraiser will get more, but I'll be paying less overall. So yes, you're exactly right. We don't know what impact it's going to have on consumer behavior in the marketplace until it happens. But simply because disclosure, full visible disclosure, is a benchmark of how consumers should be treated, we think for that reason alone, just to disclose more important information to the home buyer, it should be done just for that reason alone. Beyond that, we would hope it would have some effect that would benefit the fees paid to the residential appraiser. So that's another decision that we're waiting on. The Consumer Protection Bureau has been testing various settlement forms and GFE forms. In one market, I think the Philadelphia market, the model forms did separate the fee paid to the appraiser versus the fee paid to the AMC. In another market, I think it was in Dallas, the fees were consolidated, so you couldn't, the consumer wouldn't be able to make that distinction. ASA and NAIFA have written a couple of letters urging that the Philadelphia model, we'll call it for now, be the one that's finally proposed and not the Texas one. So that's another important decision that we're waiting on. I said a moment ago that Dodd-Frank turned the residential real estate appraisers world upside down. We've already seen that they've proposed regulations on appraiser independence and the customary and reasonable fee issue. But there are several other provisions in Dodd-Frank affecting appraisers, which are very important, and we're still waiting on those to be proposed. They include items such as quality controls of automated valuation models. The federal government is yet to propose, but we think they will shortly, quality control standards for AVMs. Another piece of Dodd-Frank is the government is yet to establish rules or propose rules for limiting the use of broker price opinions. The actual regulation of AMCs, which are owned by federally regulated financial institutions, those have to be promulgated. For AMCs where there's no affiliation with a federally regulated financial institution, it's up to the states to regulate the activities of AMCs. But some of the larger AMCs are owned by federally regulated financial institutions. In those cases, it's up to the federal bank regulatory agencies to determine how AMCs operate, what they can do, what they cannot do. So that's another element of Dodd-Frank. So we have several very important items that have yet to be proposed by the federal bank regulatory agencies, which we're waiting on. And so once those are proposed, ASA and NAIFA are going to have to get very busy not only writing comment letters, but going in and seeing the regulators to either support what they've done or to oppose what they've done and to urge there to be changes.